Hello, everyone, and welcome to Get CanLit, a podcast that showcases Canadian authors. I'm your host, Maria Zupardi, an avid CanLit reader, and keep on listening to find your next favorite book today. All right, so because this is the very first episode, I figured I would kind of wrap up my reading year of 2022 in Canadian authors and just to kind of shout out which ones were my favorite and some honorable mentions, and maybe if we have time at the end, some of the books that were huge misses for me. But first, a little bit about me. So, I love Canadian authors. I love promoting Canadian literature on my Instagram at Reading Maria. And I also work in the publishing industry at an independent Canadian press. So, I literally live and breathe Canadian authors by day. And at night, I try to read as much as I can. Of course, our industry is influenced heavily by American and even United Kingdom authors, so I thought that this little corner of the internet can be specifically for Canadian authors. So that's why I'm starting this podcast as well. So, just as a snapshot of what I read in 2022, I read surprisingly 131 books, which is wild. Like, I've never read that much before. That's just insane to me that I actually read so much in a year. And 60 of those books were by Canadian authors, which I was surprised to see so much. That's about like 45%. If my math is correct, you never know. I didn't think I read so much CanLit in 2022, but here we Okay, so let's get right into my favorites of 2022 by Canadian authors. This is in no particular order. I was just kind of going through my Goodreads and whatever I read first, I kind of just listed here. So yeah, if there is, or sorry, not if, when I reach my absolute favorite CanLit novel of the year, I will let you know, I promise. Okay, so first on my list is Blood Atonement by S.M. Friedman. I loved this cult psychological-esque thriller. It is definitely for fans of, like The Silent Patient or any other cult thrillers that you've read and loved this year. What I think puts this novel apart from the other cult thrillers that I've read is the dual timelines. Her present day situation where she's suffering from dissociative identity disorder. So that means she has multiple personalities and she's trying to work through that with her therapist. And then some of the other kids who had escaped, they slowly start, they're under very suspicious circumstance. So as they're being investigated, as the evidence starts pointing towards her, that's when things get very interesting. So yeah, it was definitely a unique read. Very thrilling. The pace was good, and I really loved it. I enjoyed it. Next up is a middle grade novel, which I think this is my only middle grade novel on the list. So that is From Ant to Eagle by Alex Little. Oh my gosh, read this if you want to cry. I wanted something sad, so a very good friend of mine recommended this to me, and I read it on my Kobo. I still have to get a physical copy because that's just how much I loved this book. It was so great. It's about a little kid who I believe, oh gosh, I should remember this book, but it's about like childhood cancer and like I really like how the author kind of dealt with all the sickness and, explaining it to a younger audience, but also making it accessible or relatable to the adults who might have read it. So it was a really great book. All right, and for the historical literary fiction fans, I have on my list When We Lost Our Heads by Heather O'Neill. If you haven't read this book yet, or any Heather O'Neill book, please, what are you doing with yourself? Like, you have to pick up one of her books. Her books are just so immersive and they're just easy to kind of get lost into. I've only read this one and The Lonely Hearts Hotel Club, I think it's called. It's a really like nice cover, like black and purple. You'll know it when you see it. But this one was just anyways, I really enjoyed it. I know a lot of people like one of her first novels, or one of her earlier novels, I guess I should say, are their favorites, but I really liked this one. So When We Lost Our Heads is about two friends who, you know what? I'm not even gonna explain it. You just have to read it for yourself because it's very intricate. It has a lot going on, like in terms of themes and issues that Heather O'Neill kind of explores. So you're just gonna have to read the book. I would hate to spoil things for you, so I'm not gonna do that. That's not what I'm here for. For the young adult fans, I have Wrong Side of the Court by H.N. Cotton, which was on the shortlist. I believe it made the shortlist of the Toronto Book Awards. If it wasn't on the shortlist, it was definitely on the long list. because that's why I read this book. I read the entire long list, or except for one book. No, sorry, except for 2 books. I read that entire list, in June or July or something, so it was intense, but definitely this was such a standout from that. It's about a boy who plays basketball and he's got clearly a lot of talents, but because of the community he's in and possibly the people he may surround himself with or he is surrounded by, and because of the reputation of the area, that's just kind of also what kind of limits him. But this book is, I think, a really successful tool in showing kids or like, young adults that no matter where you come from, like you can always succeed no matter all the outside sources that are kind of drilling it into your head that no, you're not going to amount to nothing. So I thought it was a really good book, very insightful. And I just love YA books that feature boys as characters because we don't see that a lot. Like everything, I mean, I know the reason is probably or most likely because girls read more than boys, but I think that this type of book is exactly what boys need to look at and to read to see themselves not only with a male character but also a male author. So for that, I appreciate H.N. Khan, and I can't wait to see what other books he comes out with because I'm already like I should probably know if he's already published something by now because I would totally pick it up like within a second and forget the rest of my TBR. Moving on to my very, very favorite CanLit novel of the year. And if you've followed me on Instagram, I've probably DM'd you about this book and bothered you to read it as you shared it, either in your stories or on your feeds. I apologize in advance if you are one of those people listening to this podcast, but it's just, you're gonna get this book recommendation forever and ever. And that is We Measure the Earth with Our Bodies by Tsering Yangzom Lama. So this book tells about, I believe, is a little known part of history, or at least not very well known. Yeah, that's basically what little known part of history means. But it's about the Chinese invasion of Tibet, and it's about a bunch of refugees who live on a camp, and the story focuses on two sisters and one of the sister's daughters who is currently living in Toronto with. In this book, there's also multiple point of view, different timeline, but it's very easy to keep things straight in your head. So it's just the prose is very beautiful. I can see why this was shortlisted for the Giller Prize, which is fantastic. I called it. I called it. I want to say that I called it right now. As soon as I read the book, I'm like, if this isn't on the long list of the Giller Prize, I'll be very surprised. And then when it made the long list, I'm like, oh, well, it better make the short list or else I'll be very surprised it won't. And it did make it. I didn't predict that it would win. I figured it wouldn't win, but it was nice that it was on the short list. I'm glad she got the national attention that this award brings to these authors. Now, I will say the ending of this novel seemed very long. Like it seemed like it was dragging on just a little bit, but it's not a big deal. I promise. Like the entire story, the characters, their travels, their hardships. I think it's all very eye-opening to certain people's situations, and I think that's why you need to read this book and why you will love it. It's not about the ending, it's about the journey. And that's what this book reminded me of. So yeah, I think it's definitely a standout novel, and award season for this book isn't over yet, so plan on it being on many more. Maybe it'll be on Canada Reads. I don't know. I'd be surprised if it's not again. Do we have a Canada Reads prediction here? Maybe. I don't know what's going to be on it, but this should be on it, I think. All right, taking a little break from serious literary fiction for like one book, and then the rest of it is a bit more serious, but it's fine. Jamila Green Ruins Everything by Zarka Nawaz. I know some people don't like dark comedies or satire, which totally get it. If that's not your thing, I would probably skip this novel. But if you're looking to read something different, looking for new things to read, I definitely recommend this. This book was so funny to me. The dark comedy was hilarious in this book. I really liked it. Another book that did drag on for a little bit near the end, but again, like not that big of a deal. What I really liked about this book and what made it a standout was, besides its beautiful cover, go look it up, it's fantastic. I just really, again, like the main character Jamila and her growth throughout the book and her growing awareness of other people's lives and situations besides her own, I think that was really great. I think we need more stories like this in terms of representation. So again, this was on the Stephen Leacock award, I think. I want to say it was on that. I think it was shortlisted too. I'd be very surprised if this wasn't also seriously considered for Canada Reads. Like, I think it's a great book, and I do think that it would. I don't know if it would make a short list of Canada Reads, but I can see this being on the long list absolutely. All right, switching gears again. So for these next two books I'm going to talk about, I think that the way that they play with the form, I think that this is what makes them a standout to me, and that's why they're on this list of my favorites. So first up, we have Avenue of Champions by Connor Kerr, which again was also on the long list of the Giller Prize. That's why I also read this book because I had never heard of it before, and I was so lucky I found my copy at I want to say it was a different book list. I feel like they were the only ones when I was looking around in bookstores for the books that's like just where I found it. So shout out to a different book list. Thank you for having this in stock. I like how this kind of reads as an interconnected short story collection, but it's really not. It's definitely more novel. So I like that it kind of blurs the lines between like genres. So I thought that was pretty cool. I again, the characters were standouts to me. I loved the story. I thought it was beautiful. I love that it really represented and was authentic, I think, to the Indigenous experience in Canada, especially with recent stories of residential schools and all that stuff. Like, I think it's very timely. I'm very surprised that it didn't make the short list. I thought it was gonna make it, or at least be I thought there was gonna be at least one Indigenous author on the shortlist, but that's obviously not what happened. But I still think that I think it deserved more, to be honest. But yeah, it's definitely memorable once you kind of get into the flow of the novel and who the characters are, because it was a little bit confusing at first. You'll really love this, like once you actually know who's who and all that stuff. So again, like that's what surprised me the most about it was the form. And the other novel on the Giller list that I think really experimented with form definitely was If an Egyptian Cannot Speak English by Nornaga. I cannot express to you enough. If you if you're really looking for something different, something literary, something unlike anything you've never read before, you have to read this book. Like, it is so great. It's short also, so you can like read it in like at least 2, 3 days. So the first part is it starts with like a little section or a little paragraph, what have you. It starts with that, and then it ends with some kind of philosophical question. Very fancy. So I thought that that was how the whole novel was going to be. No, when we get into the second part, it's exactly like a regular novel. So it reads with chapters, flipping point of views. It was really great. And then the last part was like, whoa, what's going on? So we are taken out of the novel or out of the setting and the characters and all that stuff. We're taken out of all of it and we are looking into a writing group where Nornaga is being critiqued by her peers on this novel that we just read, which is like, I'll give you a second to kind of like wrap your mind about that because it is a bit of a mind fuck. I'm not gonna lie, but it was just so thrilling, I guess, would be the right word when I realized what was happening. Because it's like, "Oh my god, I can't believe she did that. I can't believe this is an actual thing that, like, authors could do, and they haven't done it yet. Because this is so cool." So that's why it's definitely made my favorites. I would say this is my second favorite CanLit novel of the year for sure. It was just so wonderful, and it doesn't leave a lot to question, but when the people at the end in the third part are discussing the book and like, its themes and other things that we didn't see, it's like, "Oh wow, I missed a bit of this." Like, I definitely need to reread this book to see, what's going on and what I can kind of pick out of what we've read before. Because like, I don't know, I just thought it was very cool. Definitely a trigger warning though for this book for domestic violence and domestic abuse. But if you are okay with those themes, then absolutely add this to your TBR like right now. Do not let 2023 pass without you reading this book. I'll be very disappointed if you do. All right, and last but not least on my favorites list is nonfiction. It's a graphic novel, believe it or not. It is Ducks by Kate Beaton. Now, I'm sure you've seen this book everywhere. You've seen it on all the major lists of the year, like New York Times, definitely a lot bigger lists too than that. Was it on Obama's list as well? I wanna say it was, which I'm shocked, but hey, that's fine. Go CanLit, represent on that list. Now, I will say I didn't buy this book, I borrowed it from the library, but I do want a physical copy for my shelves after reading it. So the experience from the ebook was it was a little small printing, I'm not gonna lie, but, like, it was okay. I was able to get by. So obviously, I think reading the physical book is a much better reading experience, but I think you'll be fine with either format you choose. I think I love that there's a lot of Me Too stuff in here, themes of like isolation and being a woman in a man's world kind of stuff. I thought it was just written beautifully, and I loved the author's experience. And the drawings were great. Again, even though I read it on ebook, I probably could have had better quality, illustrations while I was reading it, but I think, again, the ebook is fine. And even if graphic novels aren't your thing, they're not my thing either. I've only read, like, 2 graphic novels this year, which is a lot for me, like, I never read one. So the fact that I read 2 in 2022 should say something about the quality of those books that made me want to keep reading. The attention that this book is getting is not misled. It's definitely warranted. So believe the hype on this one. That's what I'm saying. I think you should absolutely read it. All right. So those are my favorites of the year. That was 9 books out of the 60 that I read that I can officially call CanLit favorites. Moving on to the honorable mentions, Dimitri wrote about female characters, but I really loved it. I loved that it was more of a mother son aspect to it. I loved the timeline. Again, like it was just such a true, I think, Montreal immigrant experience as a Muslim woman. I really liked that. So I think, again, that's why it stood out for me. I just wish it was longer. Like, I don't want a CanLit sized novel by Dimitri Nasrallah. I want a longer one, like a true, like, chonker of a novel from him, because I could read his words for, like, ever, and I'd be happy because he has great writing. Alright, those are all the honorable mentions I have. I did have more on my list, I'm not gonna lie, but as I was recording this podcast, I'm like, I can just take that one off." So you'll never know what they were. I will probably not know what they are tomorrow because I'll forget which books they were, but it's fine. So don't ask me, basically, is what I'm telling you. Please do not ask me what those books were that I took off my list. Anyways, I guess we do have time for misses. Everybody can hate one book, and you can be the one person who really got a lot out of it, and that's fine. But for me, these are just not it. So these 2 books that I'm going to mention next, it wasn't them, it was me. I was just expecting more from them. So that is What We Both Know by Fawn Parker and In the Dark We Forget by Sandra S.G. Wong. Now, that's not to say I wouldn't not read a book by them again, because obviously, again, like I just had different expectations or God knows what. It happens to everybody. But for Fawn Parker, I'm very excited to see what other books she writes. I think she's a fabulous writer. Her book was just not my cup of tea. And Sandra S.G. Wong, I think we need more thriller writers in Canada. So I'm excited to see what else she writes. And I'll definitely pick up both of their books at some point in the future, or whatever future books they put out, because I think they're great. Now, oh, okay. One other book that was kind of a disappointment, but I kind of didn't like, was My Face in the Light by Martha Shabazz. Beautiful cover. Like, this was definitely a cover buy for me. I just I probably should have read the description, and I mean, I guess it was also in the Toronto Book Awards, which is why I read it. So I was gonna read it anyways, but if it wasn't on that, I would just have bought it and left it on my shelf. Because again, like, it didn't interest me to begin with, and then the story didn't interest me as I read it. I probably should have DNF'd it. But, oh well, here we are. I think, again, like, if you're in the right mindset of, like, sitting down with a very serious novel, then you'll probably like this, but I was in a "let's read as many books as I can in this month" kind of mindset, so that's probably what hindered my experience. A book I was very confused by was Pure Color by Sheila Heti. Now, I've never read Sheila Heti before. Will I read her after reading Pure Color? Probably not. It was just very weird. It started off okay. I was like, "Okay, where's this book going?" But then as it was going on and it was, like, incestuous, descriptions, I was like, "What is this book? Why am I spending my time on it?" But it was short, like, I read the whole thing. I do not remember a single word, but again, like, it was too literary for me. It was too smart for me. I could not. I don't get it. I don't get the hype of Sheila Heti. Yeah, I just don't get it. Anyways, is that my fault? Probably not. I think she's definitely a gifted writer, but she's just not for me. And I'm going to stay very, very far away from her from now on. I know some people love her. Good for you. I'm happy for you. I'm really happy that you like Sheila Heti as an author. But again, for me, she is just I'm done. I cannot. I can't stand another book from her. Her cover's beautiful though. I really like how simple it is. I'll give her that. It was a very beautiful cover and it was actually related to the book. I was shocked when I read that part in the book. I'm like, "Oh my god." Anyways, yeah. I thought it was very smart. So, great cover design. The book could be better. All right, my last book on the Mrs. list. Again, this is another book. If you follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, my private Instagram, where else? Probably TikTok. I'm sure I've talked about this book on TikTok. You will not be surprised that this is at the bottom of my list. And that is I'm Sorry in Advance, Run Towards the Danger by Sarah Polley. I have heard that she is a talented director, actor, all that stuff. But I don't think that translates well to the page. I'm sorry, I just don't. I think memoirs about somebody's life should be inspirational. You know what I mean? Like it just shouldn't be what she wrote. And I see again, like I know people are huge fans of hers and I know that they really liked this book. Great. I'm 1,000% glad for you. I'm happy you got more out of it than I did. But yeah, it was not for me. I just don't I did not care about her life that much. But I know she's in the news, I think, for Woman Talking, which I know people have said it's a great adaptation. I definitely wanna watch that in the future. I have nothing against her actorial or directorial skills, but, as an author, will not pick up a book by her again. These essays were long as fuck. I regret buying the ebook. I wish I could return it. I should have waited for my library hold to come in, but I was too impatient, and that's what I got. I got a real dud of a novel. One thing I do wanna do every single episode is because I buy a lot of books, I have no control. It's pretty bad. Last time I counted my books, I owned over 500, and I'm pretty sure this was also, like, a couple months ago, and at the time, I had over what was it? Like, I think over 100 or, like, just around 200 unread. So it's pretty bad. You can go through my Instagram comments, and try to find out where I said how many books were unread on my TBR, because I definitely did leave it in a comment. But anyways, this is a CanLit focused podcast. So what I did was got the vast majority of my unread Canadian authored books, and I put them in a jar. I wrote them all out on pieces of paper. I folded them up really nice. I have a little Queen Book sticker on my jar so I know it's my CanLit jar. And yeah, I'm going to pick one out. And by the time I come back to my next episode, I will have it read and I will let you know if I recommend it or not. So let's pick out our very first book. And I hope that didn't hurt your ears. I regret not doing this. I did not count how many books that I put in here. Yeah, I apologize, but there's at least 50, if not more. Ooh, oh my god, thank god I got this book. So the first book I picked was The Centaur's Wife by Amanda Leduc, which has been on my TBR since it was released. I bought it, haven't read it, but now I'm gonna read it for the next time we meet. I definitely have not read any of her books before. I also have her nonfiction book, Disfigured, somewhere in this jar to be read eventually. But I believe this was her debut novel, so I'm very excited. I feel like, again, she's another Canadian author that is just known in Canada. I think she deserves to be known internationally. So, yeah, that's that. I can't wait to read it. It's a bit of a long-ish novel, so I hope I can get through it fast. One thing I wanted to say when I was doing this CanLit TBR, because some books like I'll know right away if it's a Canadian author, others I won't know. So as I was going through a lot of authors and where they live and all that stuff, I didn't realize how many authors from the UK that I own, which is wild to me. I didn't expect that. So I'm glad I found at least 50, probably more authors to add to this TBR jar. And I will only add to it if I buy a book that's a backlist book. So like if I buy a Canadian book that's released in 2023, then I will not add it to this jar because I'm adamant that I'll read it. So we'll see what happens. Alrighty, thank you everyone for listening to the very first Get CanLit podcast. Please be sure to share this episode with your friends and family so they can find more Canadian authors to read as well. And definitely check the podcast out on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Get CanLit Podcast. And I will see you for the next episode.